What's happening, NFL fans? Kevin Smith with you for a Tuesday episode of the Call Sheet Daily. Got a great topic for you today. It's a topic that I think is one that people sometimes, maybe they mistake its importance when evaluating quarterbacks. And it's the question of arm strength. Do you have to have great arm strength to be a great quarterback? Or if I put it a little bit differently, to what degree does having great arm strength affect your ability to play the position at a high level? And the reason we're asking this question is because I've been starting to pay attention to some of the mock drafts that are out there. I mean, I know that everybody loves the mock draft, man. Everybody seems to have an opinion on craft beer and mock drafts. Those are things that are popular for people to talk about these days. And the mock drafts are often parodies of one another. People just parroting what they've heard from other mock drafters, etc. You usually see similar players being mocked to similar teams, or at least in similar areas of the draft. But there's an outlier in this particular draft in that regard, and it is Colorado quarterback Shedeur Sanders, who I have seen, just looking at mock drafts over the last couple of days, I've seen Shedeur Sanders mocked as high as number 2 to the Cleveland Browns, and I've seen him mocked all the way down at number 26 to the LA Rams. And lots of places in between. Saw one yesterday where they had him going to the Steelers at number 21. Saw him going to Vegas at number 6. People have him at the Giants at number 4. People have trade scenarios where teams are trading up into the teens to get him if he starts to slide out of the top 10. It just doesn't seem like there's any consensus right now on where Shedeur Sanders is going to land, or on what teams really want Shedeur Sanders. And I was listening to ESPN radio this morning as I was getting my kids ready for work, and one of the commentators on there said the biggest reason there is so much disparity on where Shedeur Sanders is going to wind up is because of his arm strength, or his lack thereof. That it is difficult to get a feel for how well or how much NFL executives and coaches believe his arm strength will translate in the league. To put it very simply, does Shedeur Sanders have a strong enough arm to be a successful NFL quarterback? And that really gets us into an interesting conversation point, which is about the degree to which you can play the position in the league without having an elite arm talent. You hear the evaluators use that phrase a lot, right? Can you get away with being a successful NFL quarterback if you don't have elite arm talent? And we have certainly seen quarterbacks do so. I mean, if you go back, guys like Drew Brees and Joe Montana, and even to a degree, Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, they had unbelievable arm talent, but they didn't have some of the most memorable strong arms for quarterbacks in league history. Nobody was ever like, hey, Peyton Manning's got a cannon. Drew Brees has got a cannon for an arm. That was never their calling card. And in the modern game, in today's game, guys like Brock Purdy and Tua Tagovailoa and CJ Stroud, I mean, those guys are all very successful NFL quarterbacks, none of whom will make anybody's top 10 list of the strongest arms in the league today. You can be a successful NFL quarterback without elite arm talent. And we're going to talk about how you can do so in a minute. But before we do that, let's look at this from the opposite perspective. And the opposite perspective is that arm talent alone will not guarantee success as an NFL quarterback. And the history books of the league are littered with pages of players who had great arms, but just couldn't do the other things necessary to become successful in the NFL. I mean, maybe the poster child for that is Ryan Leaf. If you go back to the Peyton Manning draft, back in 1998, when those guys were coming out, there was a legitimate debate about who should the Indianapolis Colts take number one, Ryan Leaf or Peyton Manning. They were seen as 1 and 1A in that draft. Manning had the pedigree, the Manning family. He was more classically trained. He had all the intangibles, etc. But Ryan Leaf, coming out of Washington State, had an absolute howitzer of an arm. Could throw the ball 75 yards, could throw the outcut from the opposite hash on a line, did all the things that wowed you as an NFL scout. But as we now know, of course, Ryan Leaf could never master the mental part of the game and had a lot of personal demons he was battling through that inhibited his ability to play the position at a high level. I mean, Jamarcus Russell, several years later, is kind of another cautionary tale of falling in love with the guy's arm, but not being able to see his flaws elsewhere. In more modern years, I got Jay Cutler. Now, Jay Cutler had a lot more success as a quarterback than did Leaf and Russell, but he never really got to where a lot of people believed he could be because he had this ridiculously talented arm. He could make these absurd throws, but he would also kill you with bad turnovers and bad body language and bad leadership. I mean, Derek Carr has been limited a little bit. Like another guy with a great arm, but his decision-making has gotten in the way of his ability. I think maybe right now in the game today, the guy who, I don't want to call him the modern Ryan Leaf, but the guy who kind of is walking that path a little bit is Anthony Richardson, who has arm talent through the roof, but so far, in his one season so far in the NFL, has showed that he's got a long way to go in other areas of his game to be successful. So let's talk about what are these other factors that ultimately determine success as a quarterback. I mean, it's not arm strength alone. And by the way, what is arm strength? Let's table actually that other discussion for a moment. Let's make sure we're defining it. Because oftentimes I think people just look at arm strength as this product of how far you can throw a football. You can throw a ball 75 yards. You've got phenomenal arm strength. But really, when evaluators are looking at quarterbacks, what they're really trying to determine is, or what they're weighing more heavily, I should say, is velocity. Velocity matters more than distance. Because let's face it, how many times in an NFL game is a quarterback going to drop back and launch a ball 60 yards down the field? I mean, you may have a couple throws like that a game, maybe. But more commonly, velocity will be important because you're going to be asked to put the ball into very tight windows. And the speed at which you can get it there from your hand to the receiver's hands will determine whether or not that throw has a chance of being successful. Windows in the NFL are very small. One of the reasons that college quarterbacks who have fairly high pedigrees don't succeed in the NFL is because they can't make the transition from college open to NFL open. College open, especially when you're playing for some of these really talented programs like Alabama, where your dudes are just better than their dudes, and your receivers are going to get open. And open means they're going to be open by like strides. Open means that the window is going to be big. And you get used to throwing into these big windows. Well, then you go to the NFL, and those windows are small. NFL Open is a fraction of what it is at other levels of football. And your ability to anticipate it and your ability to get the ball out quickly are major factors in whether or not you can throw into some of these tiny NFL windows, but so is velocity. How much heat can you put on the ball? Doesn't necessarily mean you can throw it 60 yards, but man, that 15-yard out cut, you can get there in a hurry before the D-back can close and break the throw up. So velocity is a big determinant or a big indicator of arm strength. Now, what are the benefits of that arm strength? Well, we just mentioned one of them. Again, the major benefit isn't whether or not you can air it out 65 yards, because if you get a couple of opportunities a season where your receiver just outruns the entire defense and is behind the defense 50 plus yards down the field, that's a lot. But on a regular basis, you've got to be able to gun these balls into tiny windows. And that is the great benefit of arm strength. And we've got obviously guys who have demonstrated over time that arm strength helps them play the game at an exceptionally high level. You think back, guys like Brett Favre, Ben Roethlisberger. I'll never forget a match. Actually, it wasn't Favre. It was Roethlisberger against Aaron Rodgers, another guy with great arm talent. And the Steelers ended up beating Green Bay in a phenomenal football game. They beat them 37-36. And Roethlisberger gunned about a 20-yard touchdown pass to Mike Wallace on the final play of the game. Green Bay was winning. I think it was 36-31 they were winning, because I don't believe Pittsburgh needed the extra point, but whatever. Pittsburgh needs a score on the final play of the game. They've got the ball around the 20-yard line, and Mike Wallace runs like a dropout route on the sideline. He's running a vertical route, and as soon as he crosses over the end zone, he just drops out, which basically means he puts on the brakes and works back to the pylon. And Ben Roethlisberger threw an absolute laser from the pocket, probably let that thing go around the 27-yard line, and Wallace caught it at the front pylon. So the throw, in terms of distance, was less than 30 yards, but it was on an absolute line. There was zero air on that ball. I mean, he didn't hump that thing at all. That was a dart from 30 yards distance for the winning touchdown, walk-off touchdown for the Steelers. That kind of velocity matters. Favre had it. Roethlisberger had it. In the game today, guys like Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson, they all have it. And they all play the game at a high level. But it's not just velocity. It's not just arm strength. There are basically 5 pillars of quarterback play that must be considered when evaluating a prospect. Arm strength is one of them, but the others are accuracy and decision-making, mobility, and leadership. Arm strength, accuracy, decision-making, mobility, and leadership. And Jeff Hartman and I were talking on our Whip Around show, which is out today, about these characteristics and what do you value? And he asked me if I valued arm strength above all of them. And I said, no. I said the 3 things that I would actually value ahead of arm strength were decision-making, accuracy, and leadership. If I were actually ranking these, I would put decision-making as my top attribute, and accuracy is my next, and leadership as my third. And then I'd entertain a conversation about arm strength maybe being next, along with mobility. I'm not saying it's not important, but as we've seen repeatedly in NFL history, if you don't do those other things exceptionally well, then arm strength isn't going to matter. Your decision-making, I believe, is absolutely the number one thing that defines success. Can you process information quickly and make good decisions predominantly from the pocket? That will above and beyond anything else, determine your success as an NFL quarterback. Are you accurate? Can you put those balls into those tiny windows? It doesn't matter if you can throw that heater 80 miles an hour if you can't locate it. If that throw is behind the receiver, over his head, at his feet. The accuracy in which you can locate your throws really is a bigger factor because you can anticipate receivers coming open, right? Let's say you're throwing 4 verts and your seam receiver, your guy running up the seam, has a read option, has a sight adjustment. And if he's capped on his vertical, meaning there's a safety sitting over the top and he knows he can't get over that safety, he's going to now have to make an adjustment to his route. He's going to break it off at around 12 yards based on the drop of the linebacker. And if you see the linebacker pushing wide and you know that your seam receiver's adjustment is going to be to break it in, make an in cut, and that you're going to have a small window to throw that in cut between the 2 linebackers in the middle of the field, you can anticipate that. You can compensate for maybe the lack of an elite arm by getting the ball out quick and anticipating the break and throwing that thing the moment that receiver clears the hip of the near backer. Even if you have a great arm and you can't anticipate that or you wait too long, you're going to throw the ball late and the backside backer is going to come over and pick that thing off. You can compensate for a lack of an elite arm by having great other traits. And man, I would absolutely put your leadership up there as well, because to command an NFL huddle takes a grown man, a confident man, stepping into a huddle where you got a bunch of 6'5", 320-pound linemen and a stud tight end and wide receivers who want the football and a running back who looks like he was chiseled out of granite. You better be able to lead that group of individuals. You have to have a presence. You have to have an it factor, what Trent Dilfer famously calls a dude quality. You can't do those things, your arm strength won't matter. Which brings us back to Shedeur Sanders. It seems as though there are a lot of concerns about his arm strength and whether or not he can make some of the throws required of a quarterback in the NFL. But I would argue this. I think the bigger concern is not whether or not his arm is strong enough. It's whether or not he's got the pocket presence to compensate. Can Shedeur Sanders do some of the things I just mentioned to compensate for the lack of maybe an elite arm? Can he buy himself time in the pocket? Does he understand pocket movement well enough to just be able to slide left one step while the pocket is collapsing to create a window for himself to get a throw off? Does he have good enough fundamentals to be able to set his feet right to use all that lower body strength it takes to generate velocity on a throw? Because if you don't have a great arm naturally, you better be able to create your velocity through great mechanics. You see guys like Rodgers and like Josh Allen, and Brett Favre used to do it all the time, and Roethlisberger used to do it all the time, make these incredible throws off platform. Well, what does that mean? That means when you're off platform, it means your mechanics aren't set properly. Your feet aren't set. You can do it kind of drifting out to your left where your hips aren't directed at your target because your arm's so good, you can just gun it in there. Well, if you don't have an arm like that, you need those other fundamentals to all be in place. And I think the bigger concern with Shedeur Sanders isn't just about his arm strength. It's about his other attributes not essentially lining up. Maybe he doesn't have the greatest fundamentals or the greatest pocket presence to compensate for the lack of an elite arm. So it'll be very fascinating as we head towards the draft. About 2 weeks away now, to see what ultimately happens with Shedeur Sanders. Where does he wind up? Because whoever takes him is going to have to bet on themselves that they'll be able to either get him to adopt or perfect those other traits, those mechanics, that pocket awareness to compensate for the lack of an elite arm, or that their scheme will do it? Man, there's a lot to think about, isn't there? A lot to think about when you're evaluating prospects, because you're betting careers on this. You're betting the future of your franchise on this. You got to get this stuff right. All right. That is our Tuesday show. Hey, join me tomorrow. Going to have a great Whiteboard Wednesday. My guest is Phil Eisenstein, current coach at the University of Pennsylvania. Phil has coached at the high school level. He's coached in college. He was at Arizona State. He was at Miami. He's coached in the NFL with the Cleveland Browns, and he's at the University of Pennsylvania now. And he's going to talk with us about defensive game planning. Great guest. Guy brings a great perspective because of his experience at multiple levels of football. Going to have a great conversation with Phil on Whiteboard Wednesday. But until then, enjoy your Tuesday, everybody. Take care.